I've always been good at staying in my lane. It's a skill I perfected in childhood, the art of being present without being invasive, helpful without being demanding. I learned early that people trusted me because I didn't ask for more than they were willing to give. It served me well through college, through my career, through the careful architecture of adult friendships that require maintenance but not intensity. Sarah was the exception to every rule I'd built for myself. We met when we were 7, standing in line for the swings at Riverside Elementary. She had pigtails that never stayed even and a gap between her front teeth that made her whistle when she talked. I was the quiet kid who brought books to recess, the one teachers praised for being well behaved in that way that really meant invisible. But Sarah saw me anyway, asked if I wanted to take turns pushing each other on the swings, and somehow 30 years later, she was still the person who called when she couldn't sleep, when she got promoted, when she needed someone to help her move furniture at 2 in the morning. "You're my constant," she used to say, and I wore that label like armor. Constants don't shift. Constants don't change. Constants certainly don't fall in love with people they shouldn't, until they do. The first time I saw him was at Romano's, the Italian place where Sarah wanted to have her engagement party. She'd asked me to come early to help her decide between the chicken marsala and the salmon, because apparently this was the kind of decision that required a committee of one. I arrived 10 minutes before our reservation, ordered a coffee, and settled into the booth she'd claimed near the window. "Sorry I'm late," the voice came from behind me, warm and a little breathless. Traffic on the bridge was murder. I turned expecting Sarah and instead found myself looking up at a man I'd never seen before, tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair that looked like he'd run his fingers through it and eyes that were some impossible shade between green and gold. He was wearing a navy sweater pushed up to his elbows and jeans that had seen better days, but somehow he made it look effortless in a way I never could. "I think you might have the wrong table," I said, though my voice came out quieter than I'd intended. He tilted his head, studying my face with an intensity that made something flutter in my chest. "You're David." It wasn't a question. I nodded anyway. "Sarah's told me so much about you." He held out his hand, and for a moment I forgot how to breathe. "I'm Marcus, Sarah's fiancé, the man she'd been gushing about for the past 8 months, whose picture lived on her desk at work, and whose laugh I'd heard echoing through speakerphone calls when I visited her apartment. I'd built an entire mental image of him based on Sarah's stories, someone confident bordering on arrogant, successful in that aggressive way that comes with corner offices and expensive watches, someone who made sense with Sarah's boundless energy and endless optimism. The man standing in front of me, waiting patiently for me to remember how handshakes worked, was nothing like what I'd imagined. I took his hand. His palm was warm, slightly rough, and when he squeezed gently, I felt the contact all the way up my arm. We held eye contact a second too long, and I caught something flickering across his expression. Surprise maybe, or recognition of something neither of us had names for yet. "Nice to finally meet you," he said, and there was something in his voice that made it sound like he meant more than the word conveyed. I extracted my hand with what I hoped looked like casual politeness. "Sarah should be here any minute. She's never actually late, just perpetually optimistic about traffic patterns." Marcus laughed, a sound that was richer than I'd expected, and slid into the booth across from me. She warned me about that, said you'd probably be here 15 minutes early with a backup plan and a mental list of conversation starters in case things got awkward. She knows me too well. Do you have a list, I mean? I felt heat creep up my neck. Maybe. Hit me. What? The conversation starters. I'm curious what Sarah's best friend considers appropriate small talk with her fiancé. There was something playful in his tone, but also genuine curiosity, like he actually wanted to know what I was thinking. It caught me off guard. Most people asked questions they didn't want answered, made conversation to fill space rather than create connection. Marcos leaned back in the booth, completely relaxed, like he had all the time in the world to hear whatever ridiculous thing I might say. Well, I said slowly, I usually start with something safe, the weather, current events, whether you've seen any good movies lately. And after the safe stuff, depends on the person. What about me? I studied his face, looking for signs that this was some kind of test that Sarah had asked him to report back on whether I approved of him. But his expression was open, genuinely interested, and I found myself answering honestly. I probably ask what you do when you're not working. Sarah mentioned you're in consulting, but that doesn't tell me much about who you are. Smart question. He nodded approvingly. I restore furniture in my spare time, old pieces that most people would throw away. There's something satisfying about taking something broken and making it beautiful again. I hadn't expected that. The image of Marcus sanding down table legs and measuring wood stain didn't fit with the corporate consultant persona I'd constructed in my head. Do you sell the pieces? Sometimes. Mostly I just like the process. My apartment is full of chairs and dressers and side tables that I've rescued from estate sales and garage sales. Sarah calls it my furniture graveyard, but I prefer to think of it as a rehabilitation center. She mentioned your apartment was eclectic. That's a diplomatic way of putting it. Marcus grinned, and I felt that flutter in my chest again. What about you? What do you do when you're not being Sarah's voice of reason? I read. Take photographs. I've got a darkroom set up in my basement, actual film, not digital. Most people think it's antiquated, but there's something about the process, watching an image slowly appear in the developer, like furniture restoration. I suppose so, though less sawdust. We were interrupted by Sarah's arrival, announced by the familiar sound of her heels clicking against the restaurant's tile floor and her breathless apologies for being late. She slid into the booth next to Marcus, kissing his cheek before turning to me with a bright smile that had been lighting up rooms since we were children. Sorry, I know I'm late. The meeting ran over and then I couldn't find parking and... David, I see you've met my wonderful fiancé. We were just getting acquainted, Marcos said, but his eyes stayed on me a moment longer than necessary. Sarah launched into an explanation of why we were there, pulling out her phone to show Marcus photos of the catering options, but I found myself only half listening. Instead, I watched the way he nodded at the right moments, asked thoughtful questions about her preferences, touched her shoulder when she got excited about the dessert selection. He was attentive in a way that seemed natural rather than performative, and I could see why Sarah had fallen for him. What I couldn't understand was why watching them together made something twist in my stomach. David, what do you think? Sarah's voice pulled me back to the conversation. Chicken marsala or salmon? Either one's fine, I said automatically. That's not helpful, she laughed. You're supposed to have opinions about these things. You're my co-planner, remember? co-planner. That's what she'd started calling me after I'd offered to help with wedding preparations. It had seemed like a natural extension of our friendship. Sarah had always been terrible with details, and I'd always been good at organization. When she'd gotten overwhelmed by vendor calls and timeline coordination, I'd stepped in without thinking twice. Now, sitting across from Marcus and watching him trace patterns on the condensation of his water glass, I wondered if I'd made a mistake. "The salmon," I said finally. "It's lighter, better for a party where people will be dancing." "See?" Sarah turned to Marcus. "This is why I need him. He thinks about things like food logistics and guest comfort. You two are going to get along so well." Marcus met my eyes across the table. "I'm counting on it." The rest of lunch passed in a blur of wedding talk and Sarah's animated planning. Marcus contributed thoughtfully but kept deferring to Sarah's preferences, and I found myself studying the dynamics between them. They were comfortable together, clearly cared about each other, but there was something missing that I couldn't quite identify. A spark maybe, or an intensity that I associated with couples who were crazy about each other. They seemed more like very good friends who decided to get married. The thought made me feel guilty immediately. Sarah was happy, happier than I'd seen her in years, and if she and Marcus worked well together, who was I to judge the nature of their connection? Not everyone needed passion to make a marriage work. Compatibility was probably more important in the long run. I repeated this to myself as we said goodbye outside the restaurant, as Marcus shook my hand again with that same lingering contact, as I watched him put his arm around Sarah's waist and guide her toward his car. I was still repeating it when I got home that evening and found myself staring at the ceiling of my bedroom, unable to shake the memory of green gold eyes and the sound of unexpected laughter. It was nothing, I told myself. A momentary attraction to someone I just met. The kind of thing that happened to everyone and meant absolutely nothing. I'd probably built him up in my mind because Sarah had talked about him so much, and meeting him had simply been anticlimactic in a way that registered as intrigue. By morning, I'd almost convinced myself it was true. The second time I saw Marcus was 3 days later at the bridal shop where Sarah was having her final dress fitting. I wasn't supposed to be there. Tradition dictated that the groom shouldn't see the bride in her dress before the wedding. But Sarah had insisted that Marcus come along to keep me company while she disappeared into the fitting room. "I don't want you sitting out there alone like some kind of abandoned wedding refugee," she'd said. "Besides, Marcus needs to get measured for his tux anyway." So there I was, sitting in an uncomfortably ornate chair in the waiting area of Elegant Beginnings, surrounded by mirrors and lace and the kind of soft classical music that made me feel like I was in an elevator. Marcus sat in the chair next to me, looking as out of place as I felt, occasionally glancing toward the fitting room door like he was calculating escape routes. "This is weird, right?" he said after 10 minutes of silence. "Being here?" "Little bit." "Sarah said you've never been married." I shook my head. "Never got close. You?" "Once. A long time ago, and it didn't work out." He paused, studying his hands. "Actually, that's not entirely true. It worked out exactly the way it was supposed to, which is why it didn't work out." I wasn't sure what that meant, but something in his tone suggested it wasn't a topic for casual conversation. "Sarah mentioned you've been together 8 months. 9 next week." "She's been counting." Marcus smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "She's got a very organized approach to relationships, timelines, milestones, goals. I admire that about her. Sarah's always been a planner. What about you? Are you a planner? I considered the question. With some things, work, travel, anything that has moving parts, but not people, relationships, those seem too unpredictable to plan. Maybe that's why you're still single. It wasn't said unkindly, but it stung anyway. Maybe. Sorry, that came out wrong. I just meant. Marcus turned in his chair to face me more directly. Sarah talks about you a lot. How reliable you are, how much she depends on you, but she also worries that you're too careful, that you don't let people get close enough to matter. She said that? Not in those words, but she cares about you, wants you to be happy. I felt that familiar twist in my stomach, the one that had been showing up every time Marcus looked at me with that particular combination of attention and understanding. I am happy. Are you? The question hung between us, weighted with implications I didn't want to examine. Before I could answer, Sarah emerged from the fitting room in a cloud of ivory, silk, and tulle, her face radiant with the particular glow that came from seeing herself transformed into someone bridal. What do you think? She did a small turn, the dress flowing around her like water. Beautiful, Marcus said immediately, standing to kiss her cheek. You look beautiful. David? I looked at Sarah, really looked at her, and felt a rush of affection so strong it surprised me. She did look beautiful, but more than that, she looked happy in a way that made my chest tight with protective fondness. This was my oldest friend, the girl who'd shared her lunch with me when I forgot mine, who'd called me crying when her grandmother died, who'd celebrated every small victory in my life like it was her own triumph. Perfect, I said honestly. You look perfect. She beamed and disappeared back into the fitting room to change. Marcus sat back down, and we lapsed into silence that felt different than before, less awkward, more contemplative. She really does look happy, Marcus said quietly. She is. Sarah's always been good at happiness. It's like a skill she developed. And you? What's your skill? I thought about it. Making sure other people have what they need, I guess. Staying steady when things get complicated. That's a good skill to have. Is it? Marcus turned to look at me again, and I caught something in his expression that made my breath catch. Yeah, it is. The world needs more people who can be counted on. The fitting room door opened again and Sarah emerged in her regular clothes, holding the dress bag like it contained something precious. All set. Marcus, you're up. Marcus stood and for a moment our eyes met. Wish me luck, he said. I've never been good at standing still for measurements. You'll be fine, I said, though my voice sounded strange to my own ears. He disappeared into the back room with a saleswoman, and Sarah settled into his vacated chair with a satisfied sigh. So, what do you think of him? He seems nice. Nice? Sarah laughed. That's the best you can do? David, he's wonderful, smart, funny, thoughtful. Did you know he volunteers at a literacy center on weekends? And he calls his mother every Sunday? And he actually listens when I talk instead of just waiting for his turn to speak. He sounds perfect. Something in my tone made Sarah study my face more carefully. But? No buts. If you're happy, I'm happy. I am happy, really happy, but I need to know you approve, David. Your opinion matters to me more than anyone else's. The weight of her trust settled on my shoulders like a familiar burden. Sarah had been asking for my approval on boyfriends since high school, and I'd always been able to give it honestly. The guys she dated were usually decent enough, if not particularly memorable. Marcus was different. Marcus was... I approve, I said, and tried not to examine why the words felt like a lie. Sarah relaxed visibly. Good. Because I was thinking, after the wedding, when we're settled, we should all spend more time together. Game nights, double dates once you start seeing someone, weekend trips, maybe. I want my two favorite people to be friends. The thought of spending regular planned time with Marcus made something flutter in my chest that I refused to acknowledge. Sure, that sounds nice. Marcus emerged from the fitting room looking slightly disheveled, his hair messed up from trying on the tux jacket. Done. Though I think I may have traumatized the saleswoman with my inability to stand properly. You survived, Sarah said, standing to link her arm through his. Both of you. I'm proud. We walked out of the shop together, and I found myself oddly reluctant to say goodbye. The afternoon had been unexpectedly comfortable, the kind of easy interaction that usually took months to develop with new people. Marcus had a way of asking questions that made me want to answer them, of listening like my responses actually mattered. It was dangerous, this feeling of connection. I recognized it for what it was and what it could become if I let it. Same time next week for cake tasting? Sarah asked as we reached our cars. I'll be there. Marcus, you're coming too, right? I need backup in case David tries to talk me out of the chocolate raspberry. Wouldn't miss it, Marcus said, but his eyes were on me when he said it. I drove home with the radio off, letting the silence stretch while I tried to make sense of what was happening to me. It had been a long time since I'd felt attracted to anyone. Longer still since that attraction had been returned with interest. I'd gotten comfortable with solitude, with the predictable rhythms of work and friendship and solitary hobbies that didn't require emotional risk. Marcus represented the opposite of safety. He was Sarah's fiancé, soon to be her husband, completely off limits in every way that mattered. The fact that I was attracted to him was bad enough. The fact that he seemed to be paying me the same kind of attention was catastrophic. I needed to be more careful, keep more distance, treat him like any other friend of a friend and stop looking for hidden meanings in casual conversation. But even as I made these resolutions, I knew I was lying to myself. There had been something in Marcus's eyes when he looked at me in the bridal shop. Something that suggested he was asking himself the same questions I was asking myself. And that terrified me more than anything else. The cake tasting was scheduled for Thursday evening at Sweet Dreams Bakery, a small place in the arts district that Sarah had discovered through some wedding blog. I arrived precisely on time, as always, to find Sarah already there, studying a laminated menu with the intensity of someone decoding ancient hieroglyphics. "Thank God you're here," she said without looking up. "There are 17 different flavor combinations and I'm supposed to choose 3 to try. How is anyone supposed to make this decision? Process of elimination. What don't you like? Fruit fillings, too messy for dancing. That eliminates 6. What about Marcus? Any preferences?" He said, and I quote, "Whatever makes you happy, babe," which is sweet, but completely unhelpful. Sarah finally looked up from the menu. "Where is he anyway? He was supposed to be here 10 minutes ago." I checked my phone. Maybe traffic? Maybe. Or maybe he got distracted by a piece of furniture that needed rescuing. Sarah grinned. "Did he tell you about his hobby? I swear he's like a magnet for broken antiques." He mentioned it. Last weekend he dragged me to 3 different estate sales because he sensed there was something worth saving at each one. I spent 4 hours watching him examine the structural integrity of chairs from the 1940s. It's like dating a very particular archaeologist. I was about to respond when the bakery door chimed and Marcus appeared looking windswept and apologetic. He was wearing a dark green button down that made his eyes look more gold than green, and his hair was slightly messy in a way that suggested he'd been running his fingers through it. Sorry, I know I'm late. He kissed Sarah's cheek and nodded at me. Client call ran long, and then there was an accident on 4th Street. It's fine, Sarah said, though her tone suggested it wasn't entirely fine. We were just narrowing down options. No fruit fillings, nothing too complicated. David thinks we should focus on chocolate-based options. Chocolate's good, Marcus agreed, but I caught him glancing at Sarah with something that looked like mild concern. Are you okay? You seem a little... I'm fine, just tired. Long day at work, and my mother called 3 times about seating arrangements. Sarah rubbed her temples. Sometimes I think we should have eloped. We could still do that, Marcus said gently, if this is too much. No. Sarah's response was quick, almost sharp. No, I want the wedding. I want everything to be perfect. I just need coffee and sugar, lots of sugar. The bakery owner, a cheerful woman in her 50s, approached with a tray of small cake squares and a pot of coffee. For the next hour, we sampled combinations with names like Midnight Romance and Vanilla Dreams, making notes about texture and sweetness while Sarah gradually relaxed back into her usual animated self. I found myself watching the dynamics between Marcus and Sarah more carefully than before. He was attentive, asking the right questions and making appreciative noises about the cakes she clearly preferred, but there was something distant in his manner. Not disinterested exactly, but like part of his attention was elsewhere. Sarah, for her part, seemed to be performing happiness more than feeling it. Her laugh was a little too bright, her enthusiasm slightly forced, and she kept checking her phone between cake samples like she was expecting important news that wasn't coming. I think the chocolate raspberry is the winner, she announced after trying the last sample. It's elegant, but not too fancy. What do you think? Perfect choice, Marcus said. David? I realized I'd been staring at Marcus instead of paying attention to the cake discussion. The chocolate raspberry is great, really memorable. Sarah beamed and turned to the bakery owner to discuss details, serving size, delivery timeline, decoration options. Marcus and I were left sitting across from each other at the small tasting table, surrounded by empty plates and the lingering sweetness of sugar and butter. You okay? He asked quietly. You've been quiet tonight. Just tired, long week. Sarah mentioned you're a graphic designer. What kind of projects are you working on? Mostly corporate stuff right now, annual reports, marketing materials. It pays the bills but isn't exactly thrilling. What would be thrilling? I considered the question. Photography, maybe. I've been thinking about putting together a portfolio, seeing if any galleries might be interested in showing my work. What kind of photography? Black and white portraits mostly. Street photography. I like capturing moments when people think no one's watching. Genuine expressions, real emotion. Marcus leaned forward slightly, his attention completely focused on me. That sounds incredible. Why don't you do it? Time, mostly. Money. It's hard to make a living as an artist. But you're already making a living. The photography would just be extra. Something for you. The way he said something for you made my chest tighten. When was the last time anyone had asked me about doing something just for myself? Not for work or for Sarah or for any of the other people who needed things from me? Maybe, I said, after things calm down, after the wedding. Don't wait too long, Marcus said seriously. Life has a way of getting in the way of the things we tell ourselves we'll do later. Speaking from experience, always. His smile was rueful. I spent 5 years telling myself I'd start the furniture restoration business someday when I had more time, more money, more space. Finally realized that someday isn't a day of the week. So you just started? I bought a piece of sandpaper and a can of wood stain and figured out the rest as I went along. Best decision I ever made. There was something in the way he said it, a conviction that made me wonder what other decisions he was comparing it to. Before I could ask, Sarah returned to the table with a satisfied expression and a business card. All set. The cake will be delivered Saturday morning and they'll set it up during the reception preparation. She gathered her purse and jacket. I don't know about you guys, but I'm exhausted. Ready to call it a night? We walked out together and I noticed that Marcus held the door for both Sarah and me, a small gesture that seemed automatic rather than performative. On the sidewalk, Sarah stretched and yawned. I'm going to sleep for 12 hours, she announced. Marcus, are you staying over tonight? Something flickered across Marcus's expression, hesitation maybe, or reluctance. Actually, I've got an early meeting tomorrow, probably better if I head home. Oh, Sarah's face fell slightly. Okay, I'll see you this weekend then? Definitely. Marcus kissed her forehead. Get some rest. You've been pushing too hard. I'm fine. I know. But take care of yourself anyway. They said goodbye with the kind of comfortable affection that comes from knowing each other well. But I noticed that Marcus didn't kiss her on the lips, and Sarah didn't seem to expect him to. Another small detail that probably meant nothing but felt significant anyway. David, can you walk me to my car? Sarah asked. I'm parked around the corner. Sure. We left Marcus standing outside the bakery and walked toward Sarah's car in companionable silence. It wasn't until we reached her Honda that she spoke. Can I ask you something? Always. Do you think Marcus seems different lately? Distant maybe? I felt that familiar twist in my stomach. Different how? I don't know. Less engaged, I guess. Like he's going through the motions of wedding planning, but his heart isn't really in it. Sarah leaned against her car door. Maybe I'm overthinking it, pre-wedding jitters and all that. Maybe. It's just, we used to talk about everything, our future, what we wanted, how we imagined our life together. But lately when I bring up anything beyond the wedding, he gets this look on his face like he's somewhere else entirely. I didn't know what to say. Confirming Sarah's concerns felt like a betrayal of both her and Marcus. But dismissing them felt dishonest. Have you talked to him about it? I've tried. He says everything's fine, just work stress and wedding pressure. But David, when he looks at me... Sarah's voice got quiet. I don't think he sees me anymore. I think he sees the woman he's supposed to marry. The pain in her voice made my chest ache. Sarah, do you think I'm making a mistake? The question came out in a rush, like she'd been holding it back for weeks. Getting married, I mean. Is it crazy to marry someone when you're not sure they're completely present for it? I stared at my best friend, seeing her clearly for the first time in months. Beneath the wedding planning excitement and bridal glow, she looked tired. More than tired, uncertain in a way that Sarah never was about anything. What do you think? I asked gently. I think I love him. I think he's a good man who will be a good husband. I think we make sense together on paper. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. But I also think that maybe love isn't enough if it's not the right kind of love. What kind of love do you have? The kind that's comfortable, safe, the kind that grows from friendship and shared values and the decision to build a life together. She looked up at me. What kind of love do you think a marriage should be built on? I thought about the question, about the couples I'd known who made it work long term and the ones who didn't. I thought about my parents who'd been married 40 years and still held hands during movies. I thought about the rare moments I'd witnessed between people who were crazy about each other. The electricity, the intensity, the sense that they were tuned to each other's frequency in a way that excluded the rest of the world. I don't know, I said honestly, but I think you should marry someone who makes you feel like the best version of yourself. Someone who sees you completely and loves what they see. Marcus does see me. He's just, I don't know if he loves what he sees or if he loves the idea of what he sees. Sarah's words hung between us, heavy with implication. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her that every couple had doubts before their wedding, that what she was feeling was normal and temporary, but something in her expression told me she needed honesty more than reassurance. Do you want to postpone the wedding? No. The answer came quickly. Maybe. I don't know. David, what would you do if you were me? I looked at Sarah, my oldest friend, the person who'd always known exactly what she wanted and felt the weight of her trust like a physical thing. She was asking me to help her make the most important decision of her life, and I had no idea what the right answer was. What I did know was that Marcus made me feel things I'd never felt before. Things that probably meant I was the worst possible person to give Sarah relationship advice right now. The knowledge sat in my stomach like a stone. I trust my instincts, I said finally. You've always been good at knowing what's right for you. If something feels off, there's probably a reason. Sarah nodded slowly. Yeah, you're right. I just need to figure out what my instincts are actually telling me. She hugged me goodnight and got into her car. And I watched her drive away with a mixture of concern and guilt that made me feel sick. Sarah was having doubts about marrying Marcus, and instead of being a supportive friend, I was standing on a sidewalk thinking about the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled and the warmth of his hand when we shook. I was a terrible person, a terrible friend, and the worst part was that I didn't know how to stop being either. I walked back toward my own car, lost in thoughts I shouldn't be having, and nearly jumped when I heard my name called from behind me. David, wait up! I turned to find Marcus jogging to catch up with me, slightly out of breath. Sorry, I was about to leave and saw you walking. Thought maybe we could talk for a minute. Sure. Everything okay? Marcus fell into step beside me. That's what I wanted to ask you. About Sarah. She seemed, I don't know, off tonight, more stressed than usual. Wedding planning is stressful. Is that all it is? We'd reached my car, but neither of us moved to end the conversation. The street was quiet, most of the shops already closed for the evening, and the space between us felt charged with something I didn't want to name. She's been working a lot, I said carefully, and her mother's been calling constantly about details. It's wearing her down. Right, Marcus nodded, but his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. David, can I ask you something? And will you give me an honest answer? Depends on the question. Do you think Sarah's happy? Really happy, not just going through the motions, happy. The question I'd been asking myself for weeks, coming from the man who should know the answer better than anyone. I studied Marcus's face in the dim streetlight, looking for clues about what he wanted to hear. Why are you asking me? Because you know her better than anyone. Because she trusts you completely. And because Marcus ran a hand through his hair. Because I have the feeling you see things that other people miss. What kinds of things? The important things. The things that matter. We were standing close enough that I could smell his cologne, something subtle and warm that made me want to step closer instead of farther away. The sensible thing would be to deflect the question, make some non-committal comment about wedding jitters, and go home. Instead, I found myself answering honestly. I think Sarah's happy with the idea of being married to you. I think she loves you and respects you and believes you'll have a good life together. But I don't think she's in love with you. Not the way someone should be when they're about to promise forever. The words came out quietly, but they seemed to echo in the space between us. Marcus was very still for a long moment, and I wondered if I'd just destroyed both his relationship and any chance of friendship between us. Yeah, he said finally, that's what I was afraid of, Marcus. No, it's okay. I needed to hear it from someone else. He looked up at the sky, then back at me. Can I tell you something? And will you promise not to judge me for it? I nodded. I don't think I'm in love with her either. Not the way I should be, not the way she deserves. The admission hung between us like a confession, and I felt something shift in my understanding of the situation. This wasn't about Sarah having doubts about a man who was completely invested. This was about two people who cared about each other trying to build something lasting on a foundation that might not be strong enough to support it. Then why are we getting married? Marcus finished first. Because it makes sense. Because we're compatible and we want the same things and we're both tired of being alone. Because sometimes choosing love feels more realistic than waiting for lightning to strike. Do you believe that? I did. 6 months ago, I absolutely did. Marcus was quiet for a moment. But lately, I've been wondering if settling for good enough is fair to either of us. What changed? Marcus looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something in his expression that made my breath catch. I met someone who made me remember what it feels like when lightning actually strikes. The words hit me like a physical blow. Of course, Marcus had met someone else. Of course, that's what this was about. The distance Sarah had noticed, the reluctance to stay overnight, the way he seemed to be going through the motions of wedding planning. He'd fallen for someone else and was trying to figure out what to do about it. I should have felt relieved. This conversation was no longer about me, about whatever inappropriate feelings I'd been developing. It was about Marcus being honest enough to recognize that he was making a mistake before it was too late. But relief didn't come. Instead, I felt something twist in my chest, jealousy, sharp and unexpected. The thought of Marcus with someone else, someone who could make him forget about Sarah, someone who could offer him what I never could, made me feel hollow. Who is she? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Marcus was quiet for so long I thought he wasn't going to answer. When he did speak, his voice was barely above a whisper. It's not a she. The words hit me like lightning, illuminating everything I'd been trying not to see. The way Marcus looked at me, the attention he paid when I spoke, the lingering touches and meaningful glances. It wasn't my imagination, it wasn't wishful thinking, it was me. I stood frozen on the sidewalk staring at Marcus while my entire understanding of the situation rearranged itself. He wasn't telling me about falling for someone else. He was telling me about falling for me. David. My name on his lips sounded like an apology and a question and a prayer all at once. I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't have said anything, but being around you these past few weeks, getting to know you, I can't pretend I don't feel what I feel, Marcus. I know it's impossible. I know I'm engaged to your best friend. I know this is the worst possible timing and the situation, and he stopped, running both hands through his hair. But if things were different, would you hate me for asking what this could have been? The question hung between us in the quiet street, waiting for an answer I couldn't give. Everything inside me was screaming, yes and no, and please don't ask me that, because the truth was too dangerous, too devastating to speak aloud. The truth was that I'd been asking myself the same question since the moment we met. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but no words came. Marcus watched my face, hope and terror warring in his expression, and I could see the exact moment he interpreted my silence as rejection. Right, he said quietly. Of course. I'm sorry, David. I'm so sorry. I'll figure this out. I won't make this your problem. He turned to walk away, and I found my voice at exactly the wrong moment. Marcus, wait. He stopped but didn't turn around. Yeah. I struggled with words that felt too big for my mouth. I don't hate you for asking. It wasn't an answer, but it was all I could give him. All I could give either of us without destroying everything we both cared about. Marcus nodded without looking back. Good night, David. Good night. I watched him walk to his car, get in, and drive away. Then I sat in my own car for 20 minutes, gripping the steering wheel and trying to process what had just happened. Marcus was attracted to me. Marcus was questioning his engagement to Sarah. Marcus was asking me to imagine a world where we could explore whatever was building between us, and I wanted that world so badly it made my chest ache. But wanting and having were different things. Wanting and choosing were different things. And no matter what I felt for Marcus, no matter what he felt for me, Sarah was still my best friend. Sarah, who trusted me completely. Sarah, who was planning to marry this man in 3 weeks. The drive home passed in a blur. I went through the motions of my evening routine, shower, brush teeth, set alarm, while my mind replayed every moment of the conversation outside the bakery. The look in Marcus's eyes when he'd said, "It's not a she." The way my name sounded in his voice. The question that I still didn't know how to answer. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wide awake and wondering if Marcus was doing the same thing across town. Wondering if he was regretting his honesty or if he was lying there thinking about what might happen next. Wondering if this was the beginning of something inevitable or if it was the moment everything started to fall apart. Part 2. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The question Marcus had asked. If things were different. Would you hate me for asking what this could have been? Echoed in my head for days afterward. In the shower, at work, during conversations with Sarah about final wedding preparations, the words followed me like a shadow I couldn't shake. I wanted to call him, to finish the conversation we'd started on that dark street corner. But every time I picked up my phone, Sarah's face would flash in my mind, trusting, excited, completely unaware that her fiancé and best friend were having feelings that could destroy her happiness. So I did what I'd always done when emotions threatened to overwhelm my sense of responsibility. I threw myself into practical tasks. I confirmed catering numbers, picked up centerpieces, organized the timeline for the wedding day with military precision. I became the perfect co-planner, efficient and reliable and emotionally unavailable. It worked for exactly 5 days. On Tuesday evening, I was at home editing photos from a recent freelance shoot when my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Sarah was at her bachelorette party, a low-key dinner with college friends that I'd been specifically uninvited from. No boys allowed, even honorary gay brothers. Through the peephole, I saw Marcus standing on my front porch, hands shoved deep in his pockets, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. I considered not answering, pretending I wasn't home, letting him think I was avoiding him because that's exactly what I'd been doing for the past week. But something in his posture, defeated, almost desperate, made me turn the lock. "Hey," he said when I opened the door. "Hey." We stood there for a moment, neither of us quite sure what came next. Marcus looked tired, like he hadn't been sleeping well, and there was a tension around his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Can I come in?" he asked finally. "I just needed to talk, not about her, about us, or whatever this is." I should have said no, should have made some excuse about being busy, about it being late, about how this wasn't appropriate given the circumstances. Instead, I stepped aside and let him into my living room. Marcus looked around with interest, taking in the bookshelves that lined 3 walls, the photography equipment in the corner, the contact sheets spread across my coffee table. "Your photos?" he asked, gesturing toward the prints. "Work stuff mostly, some personal projects." He picked up one of the contact sheets, studying the small black and white images. "These are incredible. You've got a real eye for capturing people when they're not performing. That's the idea. This one." He pointed to a frame near the middle of the sheet, an elderly man feeding pigeons in the park, completely absorbed in his task. There's something so peaceful about him, like the whole world has quieted down to just him and the birds. I moved closer to see which image he meant, close enough to catch that familiar scent of his cologne. I watched him for almost an hour before I took that shot. He comes to the same bench every Tuesday at 3 o'clock, rain or shine. Do you think he knows you photographed him? Probably not. That's usually how I prefer it. People are most themselves when they don't think anyone's watching. Marcus looked at me then, really looked at me, and I felt that familiar flutter of awareness. Is that how you see people when they don't think anyone's watching? Sometimes. What do you see when you look at me? The question was quiet, almost hesitant, and it made something twist in my chest, because what I saw when I looked at Marcus was someone struggling with the same impossible situation I was struggling with. Someone trying to be honorable while wanting something he couldn't have. Someone who's trying very hard to do the right thing, I said honestly, and failing spectacularly. Are you? Failing? Marcus set down the contact sheet and turned to face me fully. I'm standing in your living room at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night talking about anything except the fact that I'm supposed to marry your best friend in 2 weeks. You tell me. I didn't have an answer for that. We stood in the middle of my living room, surrounded by evidence of my solitary life, and I wondered if this was what drowning felt like, this sensation of being pulled under by something stronger than my ability to resist. Why are you here, Marcus? Because I can't stop thinking about you. The words came out in a rush, like he'd been holding them back for days. Because every time I'm with Sarah, I'm thinking about something you said or the way you laugh or how your face changes when you're really concentrating on something. Because I wake up every morning and the first thing I think about is whether I'll see you that day, Marcus. I know this is insane. I know I'm supposed to be focusing on my relationship with Sarah, on building a marriage with someone who deserves better than a fiancé who's distracted by... He gestured helplessly between us. This, whatever this is, it's attraction, I said quietly. It's just attraction. People get attracted to other people all the time. It doesn't have to mean anything. Does it feel like just attraction to you? I looked at Marcus, at the way the lamplight caught in his hair, at the vulnerability in his expression, at the careful distance he was maintaining between us, even while confessing feelings that could destroy both our lives, and knew I couldn't lie. No, I whispered. It doesn't. Something shifted in Marcos's expression, relief mixed with something that looked like fear. So what do we do? Nothing. We do nothing. David, no, listen to me. I moved away from him, putting the coffee table between us like a barrier. Sarah is getting married in 2 weeks. She's happy, excited, completely trusting both of us to be there for her. Whatever we're feeling, whatever this is, it doesn't matter compared to that, doesn't it? You know it doesn't. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. Do you think we would have worked in some other version of our lives? The question hit me like a physical blow, because I'd been asking myself the same thing for weeks, spinning out scenarios where we'd met differently, where Sarah wasn't a factor, where we could explore this connection without destroying anyone's trust. In every version except this one, I said, and hated how true it sounded. Marcus's face crumpled slightly, and I saw the exact moment he accepted what I was telling him, that this, whatever this was, could never be more than stolen moments and unfinished conversations and the ache of something that would never be allowed to exist. I should go, he said. Yeah, you should. But neither of us moved. We stood in my living room looking at each other across the space that might as well have been an ocean, and I thought about all the things we weren't saying, all the words that would remain unspoken because speaking them would make this real in a way that couldn't be taken back. David? Marcus's voice was soft, uncertain. For what it's worth, I think you're wrong about it just being attraction. I know, I whispered. I know I am. He left then, and I watched through my front window as he sat in his car for several minutes before driving away. I wondered what he was thinking, if he was asking himself the same questions that were circling in my head like vultures. Questions like, how do you love someone you can't have? How do you want something that would hurt the people you care about most? How do you live with the knowledge that your feelings could destroy the trust of the most important person in your life? I didn't have answers. All I had was the growing certainty that the next 2 weeks were going to test every principle I'd built my life around. The days leading up to the wedding passed in a strange, suspended state. Sarah was in full bride mode, calling me multiple times a day with last-minute questions and concerns that seemed to multiply exponentially as the date approached. Marcus was conspicuously absent from most of these conversations, showing up for required events but maintaining a careful distance from both Sarah and me. I told myself this was good, smart, the responsible thing for all of us. But every time I saw him at the venue walkthrough, at the rehearsal, during the brief moments when Sarah left us alone together, I felt the weight of everything we weren't saying. The rehearsal dinner was held at Romano's, the same restaurant where Sarah and I had met Marcus months earlier. Sitting at the head table watching Sarah give her speech about love and friendship and the importance of having the right people in your life, I felt like I was living in some alternate universe where I was out here playing the role of supportive best friend while internally falling apart. Marcus was seated diagonally across from me, close enough that I could observe every subtle expression that crossed his face. He smiled at the right moments, laughed when Sarah told embarrassing stories about their relationship, played the part of devoted fiancé with skill that probably fooled everyone except me, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his smile never quite reached his eyes, the careful attention he paid to his wine glass to avoid looking directly at me. David's been incredible through all of this, Sarah was saying, gesturing toward me with her champagne flute. I honestly don't think I could have pulled off this wedding without him. He's organized, thoughtful, completely reliable, everything a bride could want in a co-planner. The room erupted in applause, and I raised my glass in acknowledgement while trying not to notice the way Marcus was watching me. When our eyes met across the table, it was like an electric shock, brief but intense enough to make my breath catch. To David, Sarah continued, who's always been there when I needed him most. I'm so grateful to have you in my life. To David, the room chorused, and I felt the weight of their collective appreciation like a stone in my chest. After dinner, as guests mingled and Sarah made her rounds thanking everyone for coming, I stepped outside onto the restaurant's patio for some air. The October evening was crisp, with a clarity that made the stars look close enough to touch. I leaned against the railing and tried to organize my thoughts, to find some way to make peace with what I was feeling. Mind if I join you? I didn't turn around, but I felt Marcus's presence like warmth against my back. Sarah's probably looking for you. She's talking to her college roommates about the time she tried to dye her hair blonde and it turned orange. I think I've got a few minutes. Marcus came to stand beside me at the railing, careful to maintain a respectable distance. We looked out at the parking lot at the mundane view of cars and streetlights, and I wondered if he was struggling with the same surreal feeling I was, that we were having the most important conversation of our lives against a backdrop of complete ordinariness. Tomorrow, he said quietly. Tomorrow. Are you nervous? About the speech? I'd agreed to be Sarah's man of honor, which meant I'd be giving a toast at the reception. I'd written it weeks ago, a carefully crafted tribute to Sarah and her happiness that mentioned Marcus in all the right ways without saying anything I couldn't stand behind. A little. You? Terrified. Something in his tone made me look at him. In profile, with the patio lights casting shadows across his face, he looked older than his 31 years, tired in a way that sleep wouldn't fix. Second thoughts? I asked. Marcus was quiet for so long I thought he wasn't going to answer. When he did speak, his voice was barely audible. Third, fourth, and fifth thoughts. David, I keep thinking, if I met you first, everything would have been different. But you didn't, and here we are. Here we are, he agreed. Tomorrow I'm going to stand up in front of everyone we know and promise to love Sarah for the rest of my life. And part of me will mean it because I do love her. Just not the way she deserves to be loved. Not the way you'd love someone you were choosing forever with. The admission hung between us like a bridge neither of us could cross. I gripped the patio railing and tried to find words that might make this easier for both of us. She'll be happy, I said finally. Sarah's good at happiness. And you're a good man, Marcus. You'll figure out how to love her the way she needs to be loved. Will I? Because right now, standing here with you, I can't imagine loving anyone the way I... He stopped, shaking his head. This is insane. I'm getting married tomorrow and I'm telling another man that I think I'm falling in love with him. My chest tightened at the words I'd been hoping he wouldn't say. Marcus, I know. I know it doesn't matter. I know nothing can come of it, but I needed you to know. Just once, I needed to say it out loud. I turned to look at him then, really look at him, and saw everything I was feeling reflected in his expression. The want, the guilt, the devastating certainty that this was as close as we'd ever get to acknowledging what was between us. I know, I whispered. I know, and I... David? Marcus? Sarah's voice carried from the restaurant doorway. There you are. Everyone's getting ready to leave. We should probably wrap up. We stepped apart automatically, the moment broken by reality intruding. Sarah approached with a smile that was bright even in the dim patio lighting. What are you two doing out here? Planning some kind of surprise for tomorrow? Just getting some air, Marcus said smoothly. It's been a long day. Tell me about it. I'm exhausted, but I'm also too wired to sleep. Is that normal? Completely normal, I assured her. Pre-wedding adrenaline. You'll probably be up until 3 analyzing every detail. Sarah laughed. You know me too well. Come on, let's go say goodbye to people. And Marcus, she linked her arm through his. You're staying over tonight, right? I know it's technically bad luck, but I don't want to be alone. Something flickered across Marcus's face, reluctance maybe, or resignation. Of course, whatever you need. We walked back inside together, and I watched as Marcus transformed back into the role of devoted fiancé. He was good at it. I had to give him credit. If I hadn't been paying such close attention, hadn't known what to look for, I never would have seen the performance for what it was. The guests gradually dispersed, with promises to see everyone tomorrow at the church. Sarah hugged me goodbye with the fierce affection of someone who was too excited to contain herself. I can't believe it's finally happening, she said. After all these months of planning, tomorrow I'll actually be married. Mrs. Sarah Thorne. It has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Perfect ring, I agreed, though the words felt like glass in my mouth. Marcus and I shook hands formally, the same careful contact we'd shared at our first meeting. But this time, I felt a slight tremor in his fingers, saw the way his jaw tightened, as if he were holding back words that would destroy everything. See you tomorrow, he said. See you tomorrow. I drove home through empty streets, thinking about the conversation on the patio, about the things Marcus had almost said, and the words I'd almost let myself speak. In 12 hours, he'd be married to my best friend. In 12 hours, this impossible situation would be resolved by the simple fact of vows spoken and rings exchanged, and a commitment that couldn't be undone. I should have felt relief at the approaching end of this emotional torture. Instead, all I felt was grief for something that had never been allowed to begin. The morning of the wedding dawned crisp and clear with the kind of October light that photographers dream about. I arrived at the church early as planned to make sure all the details were in place before the chaos began. The flowers were perfect, the program stacked neatly in the vestibule, the unity candle positioned exactly where Sarah had specified. everything was ready for a perfect wedding, which made the text message I received at 11:30 all the more unexpected. Can you meet me in the parking lot? I need to talk to you. I stared at the message for a long moment, my heart hammering against my ribs. Marcus was supposed to be with his groomsmen getting ready in the church basement. The last thing either of us needed was to be seen together right now, especially given the state of mind we'd both been in lately. But something in the tone of the message, urgent, almost desperate, made me pocket my phone and slip out the side door. I found Marcus standing beside his car, still in jeans and a button-down shirt instead of his wedding attire. He looked like he hadn't slept, and when he saw me approaching, the relief in his expression was almost painful to witness. "Thank God," he said. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "What's wrong? Where's your tux? Sarah's going to be here in an hour, and if she sees you..." "I can't do it." The words stopped me cold. "What?" "I can't marry her, David. I've been trying to convince myself all morning that I could go through with it, that I could stand up there and make promises I'm not sure I can keep, but I can't. Not when I feel the way I feel about..." He gestured helplessly toward me, and I felt something between panic and relief flood my chest. "Marcus, you're just nervous. Everyone gets cold feet before their wedding. It's normal. This isn't cold feet. This is me realizing that I'm about to make the biggest mistake of my life, and not just for me, for Sarah too. She deserves someone who's completely present for their marriage, someone who isn't distracted by feelings for her best friend." I looked around the parking lot, checking for any sign that we were being observed. The last thing Sarah needed was wedding drama, especially drama involving the two people she trusted most. "You can't do this to her," I said quietly. "Not today, and not like this. I know it's terrible timing. But David, what if this is the only chance we have to be honest about what's happening between us? What if I marry her and we spend the rest of our lives pretending this connection doesn't exist? Then that's what we do. We pretend. You really think you can do that? Pretend for the next 40 years that you don't feel what you feel?" I stared at Marcus, seeing my own desperation reflected in his expression. The truth was, I didn't know if I could pretend. The past few weeks had been the most emotionally intense of my life, and the thought of suppressing these feelings indefinitely felt like a kind of slow death. But the alternative was worse. Sarah is inside that church right now, getting into her dress and thinking about how perfect this day is going to be. I said, "Her parents flew in from Denver. Her grandmother is here from the nursing home for the first time in 6 months. Everyone she's ever cared about is gathered in there waiting to celebrate the happiest day of her life." I know. Do you? Do you really understand what you're suggesting? Because if you don't go through with this wedding, it's not just about you and me. It's about destroying Sarah's happiness, humiliating her in front of everyone she loves, and ruining the friendship that's been the most important relationship in my life. Marcus flinched like I'd struck him. "You think I don't know that? You think this decision is easy for me? Then why are you making it?" "Because I love you." The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the breath from my lungs. We stood in the church parking lot surrounded by cars belonging to wedding guests, and I felt my entire world shift on its axis. "Don't," I whispered. "Please don't say that." "Why? Because it's inconvenient? Because it complicates things? Because it doesn't change anything?" I took a step back, putting distance between us even though every instinct I had was screaming at me to move closer. Marcus, even if you called off this wedding, even if you and Sarah never got married, that doesn't mean we could be together. She's my best friend. I can't build my happiness on the ruins of hers. So we're just supposed to ignore this? Pretend it doesn't exist? Yes, that's exactly what we're supposed to do. Marcus stared at me for a long moment, and I watched something die in his expression. Not love. That was still there, burning in his eyes like a flame I couldn't look at directly. But hope. The possibility that this impossible situation might somehow resolve itself in our favor. You're right, he said finally. Of course you're right. I'm being selfish. You're being human. Same thing sometimes. Marcus ran both hands through his hair and I could see him pulling himself back together, reassembling the mask of the devoted fiancé. I should go get ready. Tom's probably wondering where I am. Marcus. I reached out without thinking, my fingers brushing against his wrist. The contact sent electricity up my arm, and I saw him feel it too. For what it's worth, I love you too. It was the first time I'd said the words out loud, and they hung between us like a bridge we'd never be able to cross. Marcus looked down at my hand on his wrist, then back up at my face, and I saw everything he was feeling written in his expression. In another life, he said quietly. In another life, I agreed. I let go of his wrist and took a step back. Marcus nodded once, like he was accepting something final and irreversible, and turned toward the church. See you in there, he said without looking back. I watched him walk away, and I knew I was watching my chance at love disappear with him. Not because Marcus was getting married, that was just the external circumstance, but because I'd chosen duty over desire, Sarah's happiness over my own, the safety of existing relationships over the risk of something new and terrifying and potentially wonderful. I told myself it was the right choice, the noble choice, the choice that someone like me, steady, reliable, always putting other people's needs first, was supposed to make. But as I stood alone in the parking lot, watching the man I loved walk toward his wedding to my best friend, it felt like the most devastating decision of my life. The ceremony was beautiful. Sarah looked radiant in her ivory silk gown, her face glowing with happiness as she walked down the aisle toward Marcus. He stood at the altar in his perfectly fitted tuxedo, looking every inch the devoted groom, and when Sarah reached him, he took her hands with a gentleness that made my chest ache. I sat in the front row, watching my best friend marry the man I was in love with, and tried to focus on Sarah's joy instead of my own heartbreak. She deserved this moment, deserved to feel like the center of the universe, deserved to believe that she was entering into a marriage with someone who loved her completely. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was probably the person in that church who knew both bride and groom best, who could see most clearly what they were both feeling. Sarah was radiant with happiness, completely present in the moment, believing with her whole heart in the promises she was about to make. Marcus was performing beautifully, saying his lines with conviction, but I could see the tiny signs of strain that no one else would notice. The way he held his shoulders just a little too rigidly, the split second too long it took him to respond to the pastor's prompts. When the pastor asked if anyone had objections to this union, the church fell silent. I felt Marcus's eyes find mine across the sanctuary, and for one impossible moment, I thought he might actually do it, might speak up, might bring this whole elaborate production to a crashing halt. But the moment passed, the vows continued, and when Marcus was instructed to kiss his bride, I looked away. The recession was a blur of music and flowers and smiling faces. Sarah practically floated back down the aisle, her hand tucked into Marcus's arm, and I realized I needed air more than I'd ever needed anything in my life. I slipped out through a side door and found myself in the small garden behind the church, breathing heavily as if I'd been running. The late afternoon sun filtered through the maple trees, casting everything in golden light, and I tried to process the fact that it was done. Marcus and Sarah were married. The choice had been made, officially and publicly and irreversibly. I was leaning against a stone bench trying to pull myself together before the reception when I heard footsteps on the gravel path behind me. David. I turned to find Marcus approaching, his boutonniere slightly askew and his face pale beneath his wedding day tan. What are you doing out here? I asked. Sarah's going to be looking for you. Photo time. I told her I needed a minute. She thinks I'm in the bathroom. Marcus stopped a few feet away from me, maintaining that careful distance that had become our default. I had to see if you were okay. You looked... I'm fine. You left during the recessional. Needed air. Marcus nodded like he understood exactly what I meant. We stood in the garden surrounded by autumn flowers and the distant sound of wedding guests gathering for photographs. And I wondered if this was how it was going to be from now on, stolen moments of honesty surrounded by elaborate performances. It's done, Marcus said quietly. Yes. I keep waiting to feel different, married, but mostly I just feel lost. Yeah, lost. He looked at me with an expression that was part question, part apology. David, what happens now? With us, I mean. Do we pretend this conversation never happened? Do we go back to being just Sarah's husband and Sarah's best friend? I thought about the alternatives, about what it would mean to maintain even a friendship with Marcus while carrying these feelings, about Sarah's plans for game nights and double dates, about holidays and birthdays and all the ways our lives would continue to intersect. I don't know, I said honestly. I think we have to try. And if we can't, if being around each other is too difficult, then I guess one of us will have to make a choice about how much we're willing to sacrifice for Sarah's happiness. Marcus flinched. You mean me? You mean I'd have to choose between my marriage and my... whatever this is with you? I mean, we'd both have to choose. But Marcus, you just married my best friend. That choice is already made, is it? Because standing here with you, after what just happened in there, I'm not sure of anything anymore. Before I could respond, we heard Sarah's voice calling from the front of the church. Marcus? Where did you disappear to? We need you for family photos. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them, I saw him slip back into his role as devoted husband. Coming, he called back. He started to walk past me toward the church, but stopped when we were close enough to touch. For one heart-stopping moment, I thought he might actually reach for me, might close the distance between us despite everything we'd said about duty and responsibility and doing the right thing. Instead, he leaned close enough that I could feel his breath against my ear. I thought I could go through with it, he whispered. I was wrong. Then he was gone, jogging back toward the church and his waiting bride, leaving me standing alone in the garden with words that changed everything and nothing at all. I stayed there until my heartbeat returned to normal, until I was sure I could walk back into that church and play my part in Sarah's perfect wedding day. But Marcus's final words echoed in my head like a promise or a threat, and I knew that whatever happened next, nothing would ever be the same. The reception was starting, and I had a speech to give about love and friendship and the importance of having the right people in your life. I only hoped I could get through it without revealing that I was talking about the wrong kind of love entirely.